Good morning. I'm Geraldine Umstead Singer, Chair of the Conservation and Natural Resources Advisory Council, also known as CNRAC, and I'm very happy to be here today. As we get started, I would like to mention that today's session is being recorded and will be available in a week on our CNRAC website through DCNR. When DCNR was established in 1995, CNRAC was as well and serves as an advisory board to the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Our efforts are to gather input from interested groups and the public to help DCNR further their mission and priorities, which is to conserve and sustain Pennsylvania's natural resources for present and future generations' use and enjoyment. Prior to COVID, we as a council would conduct our business in a public setting, and now we have gone virtual, as many others have as well, and it's been a great way to reach out to many, many more people joining in the dialogue and sharing of information. CNRAC Conversations is one of the outcomes of that virtual format. So on behalf of the council, I would like to welcome everyone to our second CNRAC Conversations, with today's session focusing on economics and the outdoors. It is our hope that CNRAC Conversations will serve as a vehicle to gain ideas, share experiences, form new partnerships, listen and learn more about the impact public assets like parks, forests, rivers, and trails have on our economic and community health and vitality, as well as this increased growth that we have seen with outdoor use and the concern with an aging infrastructure, and ultimately to support and help DCNR as they work to create better outdoor experiences for all people, including generations yet to come. This event is a result of the efforts. Pardon? Are we okay? Sorry. This event is a result of the efforts of actually two CNRAC work groups, Infrastructure and Communications and Outreach. Many thanks to them for their work and guidance in developing today's session. In addition to the work groups, I would also like to thank DCNR staff who were very instrumental in helping us make this happen. Gretchen Leslie, Senior Advisor to the Secretary, Katrina Harris, CNRAC Administrator, and Era Vinch, our behind-the-scenes person keeping us all connected today. We are joined also by several members of DCNR staff, including Secretary Cindy Dunn, who has been very supportive and encouraging of CNRAC's work. I would like to turn it over to the Secretary for a quick hello. Cindy?
Hi, Geraldine. Thank you. And I heard the word quick, and I understand this meeting. So yes, thank you for inviting me, and hats off to CNRAC for assembling such an excellent panel of experts. I know for us and the senior leadership team of DCNR, we benefit greatly from CNRAC's work and wisdom, and value your input, and especially pulling together forums like this to help us all learn together. I know our executive team at DCNR is in a position of justifying expenditures for recreation. As a recreation leader in the Commonwealth, we're advocates for recreation investment, whether it's on state parks, forests, lands, trails, trail gaps, local parks, etc. And I often get the question of what's the return on this investment? I mean, we have a growing sense of the essential nature of outdoor recreation to people's health and their lives. However, when it comes to spending government money, the question comes back, what's the return on investment? Of course, that money doesn't come back to DCNR, but we know and understand it has a great impact on the economy of Pennsylvania. So I think today's panel will really help shed a light on that value. Certainly, I'll be taking notes for use in my conversations in the next budget hearing, etc. And again, I want to join Geraldine in thanking Gretchen Leslie and staff for really leading off on recreation. We are, as a state's recreation leader, we're looking to really assemble the diverse elements of the outdoor recreation industry and providers, and we're looking to hire a director of outdoor recreation by the end of this year to really help advance Pennsylvania in what's becoming a national movement on recreation and its many values. So I'm excited to sit back and listen and learn and benefit from the great experts that CNRAC has assembled here. Thank you.
Thanks, and thanks for joining us. We're so glad to have you here. Today, we have participants representing organizations in the economic, business, conservation, recreation, and tourism arena. And we welcome them, and we're so glad that you could join us. Our CNRAC members are also joining us today, and I would like to thank them for participating and also remind you that you too can ask questions. Just turn on your camera and unmute. From that perspective, you're set to go and able to do that. All right, we are also very excited to have such a great panel of speakers leading our discussion today, both on a national and statewide level. So let's get started. I'd like our panel to introduce themselves in a few sentences about their work and organization, and if you could also share with us your favorite Pennsylvania public land experience or place. So to get us started, Kevin, we'll turn it over to you, and we'll probably just move down in the order of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherilyn, and thank you to Secretary Dunn and everyone for joining. My name is Kevin Schreiber, President and CEO of the York County Economic Alliance. Our organization serves as our countywide economic development corporation. We also serve the functions of a countywide chamber of commerce. We have a Main Street organization representing our historic downtown York, and get to interface with a whole host of economic development professionals, state, federal, local government. And really, we pride ourselves that our team kind of wakes up every morning to make positive things happen in York County. And that includes positive things within our outdoor economy here in central Pennsylvania. And I would just share that personally, and Silas, who will be moderating this, joked last week in our prep session that he, I think, accurately predicted my favorite experience in with respect to outdoor amenities is probably joining my wife and our little spaniel, Stella Blue, in a variety of outdoor amenities, such as right here in York County, Canine Meadows at John Rudy Park, our county park, which is a tremendous asset for dog parents, but also walking along our Heritage Rail Trail or enjoying any of our other parks like Pinchot or Rocky Ridge or things of that nature. So definitely family experience, joined with our dog, who joins me today, sleeping patiently and waiting to learn more from others. So I'll pass it back or move down to Piper.
Hi, folks. I'm Piper Vanord. I own Allegheny Outfitters. We're an outdoor store and outfitter based in Warren, Pennsylvania, Allegheny National Forest region of the Pennsylvania Wilds. We put roughly 10,000 plus people on the river and forest annually. I would say my special place is definitely the river. The Allegheny just continues to sort of give back, helps you find your footing. The catalyst for many friends that I hold dear. Happy to be here today. Thanks for including us.
Thanks, Piper. I think that means I'm next. Jim Rogers, the Chief Strategic Officer at Dalwood Engineering. We are a Pennsylvania-based consulting engineering firm about to celebrate our 30th year in business. And Pennsylvania is home to us, even though we have offices stretching from Chicago to the European Union. Very excited to be part of this panel today. For almost all of our history, working with the Commonwealth, and particularly DCNR, has been a big part of the work we do at Dalwood. And I guess I would say, for me, in my spare time, my favorite place to be is in the outdoors in Pennsylvania. Although I'm not allowed to pick where we go hiking anymore and when, because I once managed to get my wife and I to the bottom of the Falls Trail at Ricketts Glen State Park, which is a beautiful hike, unless you do it on a day that a tropical storm is coming to Pennsylvania. So we got back to the car safely, just very, very wet. So now she gets to pick where and when we go hiking. I'll pass it on to Alex.
Thank you, Jim. My name is Alex Michaels. I'm the president and CEO of Discover Lehigh Valley. I represent the 62 municipalities in the 3 cities of Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton in this beautiful region called Lehigh Valley. It's first of all, thank you for having us. This conversation is very near and dear to my heart. I really understand the importance of outdoor rec and how it affects our economy, specifically the Lehigh Valley right now. But I'm looking forward to this conversation. But to give you my favorite place, I've actually been interviewed multiple times since I got back to Lehigh Valley, and I continue to stick with the same one, which is Trexler Park here in Allentown. I also like the Carl Stern Arts Walk, but Trexler Park is just one of those unique venues here in the Lehigh Valley that it kind of fits everyone's purposes, and it gets everyone outdoors. They're walking their dogs, and it's just one of those places that are near and dear to my heart. And if you ever get out here, you have to experience that 1.5 mile trail through that park. But I'll pay it forward now to Shireen, I think is next.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shireen Fahr, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Cumberland Area Economic Development Corporation. We are Cumberland County's designated economic development organization, as well as the Tourism Promotion Agency. So we're a fully integrated agency that is engaged in balancing and maintaining our quality of life and keeping a healthy economy going to support those of us that are lucky enough to live here. I love all things outdoors about here. I am a transplant to Pennsylvania. I came here about 27 years ago, and I've stayed, never left the state. And my favorite thing to do in more passive recreation is just to sit outside my backyard. I overlook the Yellow Breeches Creek, and I love to just watch the wildlife, all of it, the fisher people fishing and just people enjoying the waterway. I live very near to Kings Gap State Park, and that is hiking is my second passion. So I like to hike everywhere, but Kings Gap is my go-to mountain for hiking. And really am also looking forward to today's conversation. It's near and dear to the core economic development work that we do here in Cumberland.
And my name is Chris Perkins. I'm a senior director at the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. We're an umbrella organization made up of 34 trade associations and nonprofits across the full spectrum of the outdoor recreation industry. And so the way to think of that is we have the human-powered recreation groups like hikers, bikers, skiers, climbers, etc. We have hunting and angling groups, and we also have motorized, hospitality, camping, RV. So really the full breadth of the $788 billion outdoor industry. We represent 110,000 businesses, primarily at the federal level, but we also work with states in hopes of creating more state offices of outdoor recreation, which we'll get into a bit on the call today. And I have to come clean. I've never done any outdoor recreation in Pennsylvania. And before you write me off here, know that it's not for lack of interest. I've had some great conversations with Todd Enos up at the Pennsylvania Wild Center for Entrepreneurship, and she's told me all about this magical place, 2 million acres of public lands, 29 state parks, 8 state forests, game lands. It sounds magical. So if someone could just make that happen for me, I will be there in a minute. It's really good to be on the call today. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. We will make sure that happens for you. No problem.
Perfect.
It is very magical, and you will love it. So thank you all very much for your introductions. And at this time, I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Silas Chamberlin. Silas joined CNRAC in January of 2019, and he is Vice President for Economic Development at the York County Economic Alliance. Silas is well equipped to lead this discussion on economics and the outdoors. His background spans economic development, community revitalization, and natural resource conservation. In his current and previous economic roles, he always asks leaders to consider outdoor amenities when looking to improve the quality life of communities. His professional leadership on an outdoor issue stems from a personal passion, especially for trails, which led him to write a book, On the Trail, A History of American Hiking, published in October of 2016. So Silas, thank you so much for all that you have done in making this happen today, and we're very glad to have you as our moderator.
Well, thank you, Geraldine, and thanks to my fellow CNRAC members who are on. Thank you, Secretary Dunn, for your leadership, and of course, Gretchen Leslie, who really is the driving force behind this issue within DCNR. And it's such an important issue, which is why it's so great to have this panel together. My job today is going to be to facilitate the conversation, but before we jump into asking questions of our panelists, I'm going to go through just some very quick contextual slides so that everybody understands what we mean by the outdoor economy, which we also call the outdoor recreation economy, and a bunch of other things. But the whole point here is that there is a thriving outdoor recreation economy in Pennsylvania already. And the real opportunity that we have is to leverage it even further through collaboration, through capacity building, through further promotion, and a lot of the things that I think you'll hear from our panel today. So if you're unfamiliar with this industry, it represents just over $29 billion in consumer spending every single year in Pennsylvania, nearly $2 billion in tax revenue, and employs over 250,000 people in Pennsylvania. All of that economic impact sustains more than 8,000 businesses across our Commonwealth. And so I think you're hard pressed to think of other similar industries that have such far reach, but are also compatible with the economic development of small communities. We also know that the outdoor economy checks a lot of boxes for the things that economic developers care a lot about, like attracting residents to our communities and to Pennsylvania. You know, that access to bike and walking paths is consistently a top 3 consideration for people that are choosing where to buy a home, and that real estate values increase when they're in proximity to parks and open space and trails. We know that increasingly college graduates are looking for places rather than jobs. They look for places that have high quality amenities, high quality of life, trail and park access, and then they find a great job once they move to that place. That's why people are moving to Boulder, Colorado, not because Boulder happens to have all the great jobs, but because it's a great place and people are following those great places. We also know that thinking of the economy as an attractor for business has grown significantly, not just amongst conservationists or economic developers who are likely to see the outdoor economy as important, but also amongst corporate executives themselves who now see quality of life amenities on par with many of the factors that we've traditionally leaned on heavily, like energy costs, market access, corporate tax rates, tax incentives. 76% of corporate executives are looking for great places just as much as they're considering taxes and incentives. And so that really changes the game in economic development when we're looking at how to entice business to our communities. And this is not a foreign concept to economic developers. York College did a survey earlier this year that showed that 88% of Pennsylvania's economic development professionals consider fostering the outdoor economy to be very important to achieving their mission. I think the opportunity there is that we're trying to put those missions and those strategic goals into action. And that takes coordination across the economic development community, the conservation community, and our state agencies. During COVID, these trends have only continued. The outdoor economy stood out as being incredibly resilient. Even while other parts of Pennsylvania's economy were shuttered, we saw our outdoor economy thriving in many ways. It supported small businesses and entire communities throughout the pandemic, and that will continue to be true as part of our economic recovery. State parks and forests in particular saw 27% increases across the system, with some individual parks seeing much higher rates of increase, and trails across the Commonwealth experienced an average increase of 52%. And if you have a popular rail trail in your community, you probably know that some of those trails saw much higher than 52% increases. For example, here in York County on the Heritage Rail Trail, comparing spring of 2019 to spring of 2020, we saw a 300% increase in trail usage. And all of that reliance on the outdoors during the pandemic has led to very high public opinion about investing in outdoor assets and the importance of the outdoor economy in our recovery. 87% of Pennsylvania voters agree that we should invest in conservation, even when we're making tough decisions in times of tight budgets. 90% agree that protecting water quality and land in Pennsylvania is critical to keeping the state's economy strong. And you'll notice that on the previous slide, that's roughly the same percentage of economic development professionals. So there's a lot of alignment between economic development professionals, conservationists, and the general public in thinking that outdoor assets are an important part of our economy. The unfortunate thing, and part of what we'll talk about today, is that that outdoor economy is under threat in many ways. One of those is that the high use during the COVID pandemic exacerbated longstanding maintenance needs that have been growing for the last several decades on our public lands. PA state parks and forests face right now a $1.4 billion maintenance backlog and a declining workforce that's been now declining for several decades, despite the exponential growth that we've seen in usage and in economic impact. And these public land maintenance needs span a variety of different infrastructures, from dams to roads, bridges, wastewater infrastructure. It's really remarkable when you visit a state park or forest and look at the infrastructure that makes it available to visitors, and thinking that at this point, much of that infrastructure is decades old. And we need to continue investing in those assets if we want to continue to see the economic impact that we're deriving from these public lands. Individual parks and forests can be really important as regional and local economic drivers. And I just have one example here from a visit that the Pennsylvania Parks and Forestry Foundation hosted a few weeks ago at R.B. Winters State Park and Bald Eagle State Forest, which are about an hour north of Harrisburg. Between the two of those units, they attract 4 million annual visitors to a very rural part of Pennsylvania. And because of the consumer spending and ripple effects of that visitation, there's $270 million of economic impact for the region. But those units face roughly $14 million in maintenance backlog. And that's everything from dams to roads to bridges to campground facilities that really make those visitor experiences possible and put that economic impact at threat. But investing dollars in addressing those maintenance needs now will have a significant return, somewhere in the ballpark of 1 to 200 over the next decade. And so multiply that impact in those two public land units across Pennsylvania, and you can see the magnitude of the investment that's needed, but also the upside of making that investment now in continuing the economic impact over the next decade. So what are we doing? You heard Secretary Dunn speak about DCNR taking the step of hiring PA's first director of outdoor recreation. CNRAC certainly supports that. Many of us who are interested in this topic see it as a really pivotal moment for state government. So we see that as very important and want to support it. And one of the things that Chris gave a little bit of a foreshadowing on was that they'll consider if an Office of Outdoor Recreation makes sense for Pennsylvania. 18 states already have these offices that coordinate, support, and grow the outdoor sector, and it may make sense for Pennsylvania to pursue that. So we're very much looking forward to the process that the director leads DCNR and DCD and other partners through to determine if an Office of Outdoor Recreation makes sense for Pennsylvania. We also have unprecedented funding opportunities to invest in our outdoor assets and leverage the outdoor economy. The American Rescue Plan Act is providing funding to every state in the nation. Right now, Senate Bill 525 is proposing a $500 million investment in a Growing Greener 3 that would invest in PA's outdoor assets. If you're familiar with the impact of Growing Greener 1 and 2, you know that they have made many of our recreation assets that are driving this economic impact possible. So this would be a really critical step in taking some of that federal funding and invest it in our future recovery. But every county and municipality across Pennsylvania is also receiving millions of dollars in ARPA funding. And if you're interested in learning how your municipality or your county can invest in your local outdoor economy, there are resources available, and we'll talk a little bit more about those at the end. We're also looking forward to continuing conversations like this one with experts who are doing this every day in the field, continuing to get our local officials, business owners, and agency staff talking out in the field. And kudos to Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation for making those conversations happen, and the increased collaboration that we're hoping to see across agencies and sectors as we advance this work. So lots of great opportunity to further leverage the outdoor economy. And that's really what our conversation is going to be about today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see folks' face a little better as we're speaking. Panelists, if you'd like, you can make sure that you're muted if you're not speaking. You can feel free to turn your camera off if you're not speaking. But I'll try to give you a heads up with who the question's directed at so we can facilitate this pretty well. The first question I'm going to ask is directed at Shireen and Kevin. And when your college did their survey statewide of economic development professionals earlier this year, they found that 88% of economic development organizations had as part of their mission or their top strategic priorities goals that were related to the outdoor economy. So it appears that economic development organizations are sort of getting this, but I think the question is, how are they putting those missions and those goals into action? So the question for you, and we can start with Shireen, is as an economic development professional, how do you see the outdoor economy fitting into the work that you do? And how do you make the case for the outdoor economy to the business community that you support?
Thank you, Silas. The outdoor economy, and I'm just going to call it, our nature, our natural landscape amenities that we have, land, air, water. Those three tenets, I think, actually anchor the economy. They're a foundational element to building economy. And it's true that I think it's more of a recent phenomena that traditional economic development organizations have recognized the value of the integration of that nature-based economy into the other economy that is maybe a little more visible in creating dollars and cents and creating GDP and creating all those metrics that economic developers use to measure whether they are providing value to their communities. So I think that our nature has been understated historically, and I think more recently it's come to light. Even within our own organization, I'd say we probably had an earlier start in recognizing the integration of nature with economic balance, because we are the fastest growing county in the Commonwealth. So we're always have been trying to balance that growth with keeping our quality of life and not losing it. And that quality of life is inherently based on the foundational anchoring element of the natural landscape of where we work and live and play. And so as a joint organization with tourism and economic development, we've sort of always had that foresight. But even more recently, just 2 years ago, pre-pandemic, we just conducted a major update to our strategic plan. And having a healthy ecosystem is, all over that plan. So all eyes are on it. And it was developed pre-pandemic and then into pandemic. And I think certainly pandemic helped to inform and create more awareness about the value of the nature that's around us and the importance of needing to protect it.
Great, thank you. Kevin?
Thanks again, Silas. I think to buttress what Shireen had noted, and you really touched on a couple of the themes in your introductory slides. I think first and foremost, it's absolutely essential. It's absolutely critical to the work that we're all doing in the Commonwealth, and certainly economic development professionals. Because you mentioned it, Silas, the millennial generation, those that are entering the workforce now, that have entered the workforce in the last couple of years, are now the largest segment within our workforce. But they're not exclusive to those who have enjoyed the outdoor amenities. And we have decades of data that now prove jobs do follow people. And we know that people want to move to a community that has an excellent quality of life. And we typically define that as access to open space and public parks and amenities and things of that nature. So I think in many ways, we've all seen this amplified over the last 20 months of the pandemic, where we have become more engaged. Certainly on this panel today and on this call, we're probably all those that firmly believe in this. But I think it's becoming much more readily apparent, and companies are cluing into this, largely because of the challenges with respect to workforce development. So I think you can make the absolute direct correlation and linkage that the outdoor economy is a workforce solution. And the sooner that our business community and our economic development professionals can tap into that and accelerate, enhance it, and really make it a core tenet of their strategy, I think we are all more the benefit. These workforce challenges, labor shortage and talent attraction and retention existed pre-pandemic. They're amplified after the pandemic, but I think we need to make the deliberate action that the outdoor economy is very much an industry. It's an economic engine for our communities, and it can be utilized to revitalize communities, to establish them, and obviously to attract and retain talented professionals. So whether it's on a micro level, doing programs like in York County, where we're leveraging our 30-mile heritage rail trail through the communities that are adjacent it, like our Trail Towns program, or improving our Codorus Greenway, which is our waterway that bisects our city, to, in a more traditional sense, to just make it much more accessible and walkable. Those are all tactics, but I think we need to do a better job of now educating the business community, our community writ large, and our policymakers on the real tangible economic benefit to investing in our outdoor economy. And that's really why kudos to DCNR and our Commonwealth government for recognizing this and advancing that outdoor economy position. That's just one more big proactive step forward for our Commonwealth to continue to enhance and really invest in the outdoor economy.
Great, thanks, Kevin. And just a reminder to anybody that's watching, you can feel free to enter questions that you have into the chat, and Gretchen will be taking a look at that and sharing that with us, and we will either try to work them into the questions as we go, or we'll address some of them at the end. So on to our next question. This one's aimed at Piper and Jim. You saw the stat there that the Outdoor Industry Association and PDC, Pennsylvania Downtown Center, have done some great research around how many businesses the outdoor economy sustains in Pennsylvania. You are both leaders of businesses that are engaged in this work in different ways. So could you talk through how your private companies are engaged in the outdoor economy and leverage Pennsylvania's outdoor assets every day? And Piper, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So we're located in Northwest Pennsylvania. We have the 500,000 acre Allegheny National Forest, Pennsylvania's only national forest, as well as 2 state parks, a state forest. So we have a lot of partnerships with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, with DCNR, and the folks at our state parks here, also with the U.S. Forest Service. We span 107 miles of the Allegheny River. So it's not even just a local sort of partnership that continues sort of as folks go downriver. On the flip side of things, we also have a really strong component of conservation and stewardship that we have partnerships with local watershed associations. We just finished up our 13th year of the Allegheny River cleanup. That's pulled out more than 130,000 pounds of just metal from the Allegheny River. So we help folks get out there. We're a resource. People can find information. And in the early years, this is our 15th year. So in the early years, most folks honestly were just looking at a map and they saw a giant green spot and came here, and there was just really no information, no way to do the proper planning, to figure out what we had here as far as our natural resources, and that includes hiking trails and biking trails and waterways. So it really was our mission to become that place, become that resource. Every waking moment, we were out exploring a new place, all the nooks and crannies, so that we could answer questions. And if we didn't know the answer, we could find someone that did, or go tackle that trail or that waterfall, or just so when the next, person came in asking that same question, we'd have an answer. So certainly we're here to help the user get outside and do it safely with the proper planning, and also sort of have these key partnerships, with all of these different agencies and organizations, that sort of make it all work.
That makes a lot of sense. And could you speak quickly to just how your business has changed during the pandemic? Have you seen an increase in people engaging with you? Have you seen a decrease? What does that look like?
Yeah, I'll try and do this quickly. I apologize in advance. I'm a talker. Yeah, it's been a very interesting couple years. Certainly, we actually, so normally we have 4 15-passenger vans. So we are spanning 107 miles of the Allegheny River, and we are putting folks in those vans every hour on the hour and shuttling them to all of their, destinations, drop-off points, picking them up. We actually, when everything happened and we opened back up just before Memorial Day weekend of 2020, we made the decision not to put anyone in vans. We just, all of the uncertainty, and we were pretty nervous that, we sort of crunched numbers and looked at things and thought, if we do 50% of, what we normally do, that would be great. And exactly the opposite happened. I mean, I had no idea just the volume of people that were specifically seeking out an outfitter that would not put them in a van. We set up 100% contactless system. It was wild. We were sold out regularly. We saw just an incredible amount of users, and fielding calls. Just the second you would hang up that phone, it would ring again, for folks that just had questions that had never been here before, and again, just looking for a place that they can get out, especially our normal traffic, but besides local, our foot traffic is normally Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Buffalo. That grew, not that we don't usually get folks from every state each summer, but it was really unique in how, New York City was a huge, a lot of folks that had never been here before, didn't know it existed. New York City, Chicago, Detroit, DC, Baltimore. I mean, it just really, folks needed to get outside. So our volume has certainly grown a lot. Long answer.
No, that's great. Thank you. Jim, I know you come to this from a business that helps create some of the infrastructure that makes park visitation possible. What's your perspective?
Sure, I think it's a great segue just hearing Piper's story over the last 2 years to talk about what we do, because it underscores what we've been at for a long time, and it's an honor to represent the engineering and design industry as part of this discussion. Shireen mentioned earlier comments to the importance of balance and looking at economic development and how we manage and mitigate that impact on the outdoor and natural world. And that's what we do as engineers. Dawood is headquartered in Harrisburg. We've got offices all over Pennsylvania, from Sayre in the northern tier to downtown Philadelphia and out to Pittsburgh and into the wilds of Western PA, where we've done a tremendous amount of work with DCNR over the years. Our job as professionals is how do we figure out how to manage and mitigate that impact and protect and conserve natural resources, whether it's working with heavy industry or extractive industries, or just dealing with the ability for people to get to these recreation points. When they go, they want to have a road that's easy to traverse and easy to find these assets. They want to go and use a toilet that flushes. They want to not be able to access an area where a bridge is out. And those are the kinds of things that we're experiencing on a broad scale here in terms of the lack of investment in infrastructure. And we're coming to a moment where that's about to change. And that industry focus is what we do every day. And we're excited to be part of it, because any given day of my 150 or so colleagues here in Pennsylvania, probably half of them are in the field looking at the real world of what we're going to impact in terms of design and implementation of what we do. And we've got a professional responsibility to do it right. And we want to be able to protect those assets for generations to come. So that's what we do professionally as an industry and here at Dalwood. And in our free time, we get to enjoy the fruits of our labor and be out there with everybody else.
That's great. Thank you. So we, obviously the basis of a lot of what Piper just described and what Jim's making possible is the tourism economy around the outdoors. So going to turn to Alex and Shireen now and just ask how, we've talked from more of an economic development focused perspective, but from a tourism development perspective, how do you see the tourism industry benefit in your region as it relates to the outdoor economy? And what's the trend look like for you over the last 18 months or so? And we can start with Alex, who I know lives and breathes tourism promotion every day.
Well, thank you, Silas. Well, definitely PA tourism, first of all, if I believe it's still the second largest industry in Pennsylvania. And it benefits greatly from our outdoor. I think outdoor continues to be the driving force why people select Pennsylvania as a destination. In our region specifically, in the last 18 months, we've seen, surging trail usage. We've seen an increase of migration from our urban areas of New York, New Jersey, the Philadelphia metro area. So we continue to see this growth happening, and what's happening, there's been a new, everyone is kind of getting interested again in being outdoors, in camping, kayaking, and things that maybe were kind of left behind. So tourism is definitely what we always consider the first stage of economic development, and it continues to be the driving force. Outdoor for us is quickly being recognized as our main driver. We continue to do a focus on our marketing efforts on outdoor rec, and we believe that it's going to be what sets us apart from other destinations. It's a crowded space out there in the world of tourism. People have a lot of options, and we have some incredible natural assets here in PA. And I think, without a doubt, just even statistically, it shows it, but it is an important factor in economic development for our area.
Alex, just a quick follow-up on that. Do you think your longstanding tourism partners, the more traditional tourism destinations, see the value of that pivot as well? Do they see themselves as part of that and supporting it, or have you had any trouble making that case?
I'm lucky to be surrounded by the Pocono region and Bucks County as well. But I think traditionally, tourism was always thought of as heads and beds and conventions and conferences, which is still a very integral part of what happens in tourism. But we're starting to realize that visitors come from all shapes and sizes, and we're very fortunate here in Pennsylvania to get visitors from very diverse backgrounds, and specifically people looking for those outdoor spaces. We have 2/3 of the population surrounding us, and we're very fortunate to have them enter our state specifically looking for those greener spaces. So we as a state have to do everything possible to maintain that area, conserve it, and continue to promote those assets that we have. So yes, the short answer is yes.
Well, great, thanks. And Shireen, I know you sort of have this, I would say it's a great platform because your tourism promotion is also part of your economic development promotion agency. So what does that look like for you, and how do you see the outdoor economy fostering the tourism part of what you do?
Yeah, well, over the pandemic period, certainly, the revenue streams as it relates to hotel tax dollars came to a very quick, painful halt. And, what we're seeing here, we are not a typical tourist attraction. We really are a business base where people come here to do business, and that makes up a good 50% of our tourists is business. But the others that come for leisure, we have always had a commitment to outdoor recreation and our natural assets. And so even through the pandemic period, we continued to push that outdoor message. So for those agencies that didn't recognize the value of the nature that surrounded them, which most of the PA counties, have that ability, they had to start from nothing, to kind of build an outdoor campaign, because they could see that's where the people were coming from. They were coming to camp, they were coming to hike, they were coming to fish, they were coming to be outside and not be cooped up in their homes. So I see that the travel economy, because of the nature-based economy that we have here, it's finally getting the attention that it deserves. I think in general, it's kind of been tamped down. It's there, it's always been there. And, and I've heard leaders, even within our own community, say, yeah, but it doesn't generate that much visitor spending. You know, those people come, they don't spend a lot of money. And it's these 18 months, they're spending a lot of money. You know, they're staying in our hotel rooms, and they are the reason for our recovery, the recovery pace that we're seeing, which is much better than what we had thought it might be, you know, as we were entering the early pandemic time. So I think it's finally getting the attention it deserves. And I do think it's here to stay. I think the awareness, you know, those new users, those new outdoor recreators that found a new passion because they had to go search for something different to do. I think they're going to stay with it. So I don't see it going away. I don't see it dissipating even when our traditional economies return back to what they were.
That's great. Thanks, Shireen. Now, we've been talking very specifically about Pennsylvania and about specific regions within Pennsylvania. Now we're going to turn to Chris for a more, I guess, a macro perspective on this. And Chris, what are you seeing at a national level when it comes to trends in the outdoor economy? And how do you see Pennsylvania positioned within those national trends?
Thanks, Silas. And just quick sidebar, you should have my job, Silas. The description you gave of the outdoor economy to kick us off here was outstanding. And I think I'll be touching on a lot of those points today. So big picture, looking at this economy, and one minor correction I would make is the data that you're citing is from the Outdoor Industry Association. They're an amazing partner of ORR. We love OIA. But in 2016, we actually worked with the Bureau of Economic Analysis to establish the Outdoor Recreation Satellite Account. And the reason that that's so important is because when we have these industry-produced statistics, people can kind of raise one eyebrow. But when we have something that is coming from the government, it's a very objective look at the industry, those numbers carry a lot of weight. And so what the Bureau of Economic Analysis has told us about the outdoor recreation industry, specifically in 2019, is that this is a $788 billion industry when looking at real gross output, accounting for 5.2 million jobs, which is 3.3% of US employment. And it accounts for 2.1% of US GDP. Now, not everything is a competition, but to put this in perspective with some other industries, this gross output is larger than that of oil and gas and mining combined. So it's a huge economic driver for the country. But I also want to put that in perspective in the state of Pennsylvania. Yesterday, I went into that satellite account from the Bureau of Economic Analysis and looked at Pennsylvania. In terms of value added or GDP, it's a $13 billion industry in Pennsylvania. It accounts for 1.6% of the state GDP. And I don't think that's like necessarily a cause for concern looking at the national percent of GDP, which is 2.1%, because each state has its own economic mix. And as we know, Pennsylvania has strengths in natural gas and manufacturing and agribusiness. It also accounts for 170,000 jobs in the state of Pennsylvania. The three top industries, at least according to those measured by the Bureau of Economic Analysis, would be RVing, boating and fishing, and snow sports. But what these numbers don't capture are things that folks on this call have really touched on. It doesn't capture the companies in other industries who are putting down roots because they see Pennsylvania as a desirable location to attract employees with all sorts of diverse talents. They don't capture the health savings for communities who have outdoor recreation when they have improved rates of diabetes or obesity or mental health crises. They don't capture the increases in property values and the local tax base that comes from investments in outdoor recreation. And to the point about other companies and other industries being attracted to outdoor recreation, I just want to cite one great example. This was from a survey in the state of Utah in the spring. They surveyed tech sector employees who were born in Utah, left, and came back. And what those survey respondents said, 85% said that the primary reason they returned to the state of Utah to work in the tech sector was access to public lands. That was their primary reason for coming back. Number two was family. And this is in the state of Utah. And so this is just to put a point on the themes that have come up so frequently in this call so far is that outdoor recreation historically has been seen as this nice to have. But in fact, nowadays, especially in the context of this pandemic, it's a must have for those quality of life benefits that all sorts of businesses and employees are experiencing from access to outdoor recreation. And so that's why I'm so fond of what's going on up at the Pennsylvania Wild Center for Entrepreneurship, where they're using this 2 million acres as the physical and cultural centerpiece of a thriving tourism and small business and craftsman economy. And I really appreciate this unified brand that's been created up there. And when I was talking to Ta about this for a rural economic development toolkit that ORR put together, one of the statistics that really stuck out to me is that 50 million people live within a day's drive of the region. I just want to talk real quick about this rural economic development toolkit that ORR has produced. What this is through a set of 60 interviews with practitioners in economic development, outdoor recreation, land management agencies, and conservation groups. We developed a set of 15 best practices as well as pitfalls and challenges related to the development of outdoor recreation economies and put them in a toolkit for public consumption. And I'll drop that in the chat. And what we're trying to do is demystify this process of outdoor recreation economy development, and also outline that it's not a silver bullet economic development strategy. The economic development strategy that a community pursues should be suited to their context. But by understanding the best practices of communities that have succeeded, as well as challenges that others have encountered, we can build sustainable outdoor recreation economies that work well for everyone. And to the point about challenges, there are challenges. Affordability, traffic, the outdoor recreation conservation intersection. And to the point about this intersection with outdoor recreation and conservation, the relationship between these two groups has been integral to the growth of this economy. Rather than seeing outdoor recreation as in opposition to conservation, some of the biggest wins for both groups have come when they work together. And just to cite some examples, the Pittman-Robertson Act and the Dingell-Johnson Act, which uses excise tax from the sale of hunting and fishing goods to fund conservation and protection of natural spaces, or the Wilderness Act, or the Land and Water Conservation Fund, or the Great American Outdoors Act. These sorts of victories for our natural spaces come when outdoor recreation and conservation groups work together. And I'll just flag that some of these issues about management of natural resources, I would argue that these are exactly the challenges we want to encounter, because historically we've made a lot of mistakes in economic development. We have a society that is increasingly focused on being indoors. We have a society that is increasingly focused on the self through the proliferation of social media. And that has all sorts of downstream mental and physical health issues. We've also just tended to build on top of green space rather than in concert with green space. So these challenges of sustainable management, these are the problems we want to have. We want to have a society that is integrated with green space and blue space. And by investing in outdoor recreation economies, I think we open up those sorts of opportunities across the United States.
Absolutely. Well said, Chris. Thanks. I know, and this still sort of keeps us on a federal level, but I'm interested in how we see it playing out in Pennsylvania. Obviously, if I opened up my Wall Street Journal app right now, there would be probably a leading story about the infrastructure bill that's moving through Congress, or hopefully will be moving through Congress, I think, for all of our sakes. It's on the top of many people's minds. Obviously, we cited that $1.4 billion backlog figure on Pennsylvania's public lands. In an ideal world, some of that infrastructure funding could help support addressing that backlog. Jim, Kevin, I'm interested in your perspectives on this. And in particular, are there things that you think Pennsylvania in general, or local municipalities, or sort of the champions of individual projects or parks or infrastructure could or should be doing now to either advocate for that investment or to position ourselves to be able to take full advantage of an infrastructure bill if it passes? And Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you first to respond to that.
Sure. Thanks, Silas. I think it is kind of the discussion of the day, right? And a couple comments have come up in the chat about that as well. We're going to be coming into a period of time where there's going to be a significant infrastructure investment in America. We already know here in Pennsylvania, as it relates to our state parks and forests, we've got a $1.4 billion shortfall in projects that need upgrades. That's just table stakes, getting us back to a steady state of where we think we have something that can work as it is today, but it's not looking ahead to the future of all these different changes that are coming to our economy and the way we all live our lives beyond just outdoor recreation. You know, having a greater emphasis on sustainability and addressing the impact of climate change, planning for that, and making sure that we have proper design in the things that we do that allow for, as Chris very eloquently put it, you know, sustainable opportunities for everyone, and trying to make sure that that works for everyone while also dealing with things like stormwater control and management, impervious pavement, impacts to watersheds, all of those things that we want to do from a conservation perspective that are the best management practices we have in the way we plan those. That's the most important thing that we're telling our municipal clients, regional planning organizations, counties, townships, cities, and boroughs. You need to have a plan now because there is going to be an influx of money, and the worst thing we could see happen is if we don't use that effectively. So that includes things like gathering data about usage. We're working with one of our municipal clients looking at fitness tracker data on where citizens are using space that isn't set aside as green space and maybe should be, but also having a coordinated and regional approach to development so that you can conserve open space and green space as part of that. So you have those as central components to help you with economic development and really luring business and residential investment and so on to your community. That's of critical importance now. And we'll see that change drastically in the future when we talk about electrification of transport, the digital impact of how we recreate, so that people don't have to only rely, although they should rely on outfitters like Piper to say, this is a great place to go, but so that they can see, okay, this is a great place to go. Now, how do I get there? And I pull out my phone and I see those assets available to me in a GIS-enabled format, those sorts of things. All that starts with planning, and it has to happen right now because those organizations and entities that are first at the table and advocate for what they need and have a plan for are going to get the best result the fastest when this funding, which is already here, ARPA money is already here and waiting to be spent, are going to be allocated for projects, because there will be a limited amount of money, even though we're talking about dollars with 3 commas in it. It's a lot, but there's still an unmet need that we have to address.
That's a great point. And, you know, I just add to that, you know, there's a couple comments in the chat about sort of how do you put these kinds of principles into action and what can individual municipalities or advocates do. And I think Jim's point is that, you know, advocacy is definitely an important piece of this, but having plans in place so that municipalities can actually act on what you're advocating for and having that blueprint for how to move forward, it takes both of those things. And so trying to have that foresight now, trying to work through some of the processes that municipalities have in place to document what their needs are and to line them up for funding, whether that's like looking at your county tip or it's looking at doing master site development plans for parks or doing comprehensive open space planning, you know, whatever form that takes, making sure those priorities are getting into those documents so that everybody can take full advantage. Kevin, I know this is probably the second time in 2 weeks I think you've been on a webinar and asked to talk about infrastructure. What are your thoughts on this?
And it was actually specifically really to that point too that you just made, Silas, of how can our local governments, our counties really gear themselves up and be prepared for a hopeful infrastructure bill to come. And I think Jim, you know, sort of hit a really good point, which is there's unquestionably a need for the traditional infrastructure investment. I think most lay people would agree with that, and certainly most on this call or this panel and in this profession would agree. But I think a common thread throughout the discussions in Congress and across the country have been, how do we define infrastructure in the 21st century, well beyond roads, bridges, which are all critically important and are in dire need of maintenance, but also things like broadband, which is now unquestionably crossed party lines, cross demographics, and we've seen the impact of the digital divide very, we've seen it hit home, especially over COVID-19. I think it's not a stretch to, again, suggest that the outdoor economy is absolutely critical to that definition of infrastructure as well. And particularly as we correlate it back to an earlier point I made, which is there's a direct, inextricable link between the outdoor economy and our workforce development, which that is not going away. The challenge will continue to persist for several years, and actually will be compounded if we have an infrastructure bill and we suddenly have billions of dollars to invest and we need people to do that work. So I think it's incumbent on us, to your point and to Jim's point, to elevate the laboratory of innovation that's going on right now by our counties and our local governments with ARPA. It's very, very tempting for our local governments to just use revenue replacement formulas with respect to ARPA, and that may absolutely be a paramount need. But I think there's a lot of really innovative projects going on across the country, certainly here in the Commonwealth, and people are really using these ARPA dollars. Hopefully this is a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic for all of us. It's also been once-in-a-lifetime resources pumped into communities where they do have the ability to pull a plan off a shelf or pull a concept that is long overdue in a community and try to move it forward to fruition. So I think it's incumbent on us to work with our collective partner stakeholders, hoping to use the bully pulpit of DCED, DCNR, DEP, state agencies to elevate some of the good work that's going on, to get it in front of our congressional delegations, and to make sure that they understand the potential where there is slight flexibility in infrastructure spending and how we can use it to really advance some innovative practices that ultimately, when rooted back to the economy, back to dollars and cents, really do produce a pretty significant return on investment.
Thanks, Kevin. Just to address a question in the comments, we will make the slides available, the slides that I showed available to all the participants, and you'll have access to a recording as well. Piper, I'm going to turn to you. We had framed this question in our discussions privately that I would give this one out to everybody, but I think that you'd be well positioned to give your reflections on it. I know in the economic development community, addressing issues of equity has become more important over the last 18 months or so. Obviously, in some organizations, it's always been important, but what have you seen locally in terms of the diversification of outdoor recreationists? And I guess, what are your insights on how we could, in Pennsylvania, do a better job of diversifying our outdoor economy by being a more welcoming place for visitors of all different sociodemographics, backgrounds, races, genders? And do you have any sort of grassroots perspective on that from just dealing with the public so regularly?
Sure. Yeah, not an easy question to answer. There's no clear blueprint. And we sort of span all across the boards as far as folks that we see, where they're coming from, the different demographics. We have teamed up with outdoor organizations in our area that are all volunteer, everywhere from, getting refugees from the Erie area out on their first ever paddling experience, to supporting our local LGBT community. And I think sort of how it's put, meeting people where they're at, being welcoming, encouraging, extending a hand, to all of these folks. It's unique, certainly in rural Pennsylvania as well. But I wish there was a clear blueprint. But I think just meeting people where they're at and being welcoming to all, we've been going through some sort of DEI training of our own, and just continuing to learn, continuing to grow, and just try to be better as the days go on. I wish I had a better answer.
Yeah,
It's a tough.
I think you're right, Piper, that there is not really an easy answer to that question.
Silas, can I jump in on this one too?
Yeah, please do, Chris.
Only because it's also highly topical for us at the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable too, and I think in the context of the last 18 months, as well as just looking at demographic trends over the last 20 years, it's quite evident that outdoor recreation has failed to be as inclusive as possible for every community that might want to recreate outdoors. And so out of a recognition of this, ORR has formed this new coalition called Together Outdoors, which is 90 plus organizations across the outdoor recreation industry, whether they be businesses, nonprofits, or federal agencies. And we're hoping for this kind of cross-collaborative learning space to talk about some of these issues of inclusion and access. And we just had our first education module last week. And what we really tried to drive home in the learning for these groups was a couple of things. First, that what we observe today in terms of outdoor recreation participation is not just sort of a random anomaly, but rather a culmination of a lot of either deliberate or sort of circumstantial historic choices and occurrences that have led to real fears regarding outdoor recreation for underrepresented groups, whether they be Black, Indigenous, or people of color, the LGBTQ community, or groups with different abilities, or whatever they might be. And because of that, the outdoors can be sort of a complicated space where on one hand, it's a place of immense freedom where you don't feel judged. But on the other hand, it can be like kind of a place of pain and fear that's been passed down through generations. And so we talked about things like colonization and de jure and de facto segregation and accessibility on trails for groups with disabilities and representation in media. All these things that in concert have actually can go a long way to explain what we observe today and actually inform a lot of the solutions that come out of this. And I want to say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that in my news scan recently, I came across this article about maybe it was the Pennsylvania DCNR that's starting to put up inclusive signage at trailheads, indicating that places are accessible and welcoming to all groups. I may have that wrong about Pennsylvania, but maybe someone in the chat can confirm this, and I'll look it up in between next question. My takeaway here is that it's like pushing a giant boulder up a hill that really everyone has to be involved in, because our outdoors are better off when they mean a lot to all sorts of different communities and when they're inclusive to all sorts of different communities. And it's only when we put our heads together and kind of both reckon with the history as well as look towards the future that we can come up with some really innovative and inclusive practices.
Absolutely. And, in Pennsylvania, we're pretty fortunate in having done some research through We Can Serve PA and the Trust for Public Lands and DCNR that looks at actual, physical disparities between densely populated areas and access to parks and trails, other forms of open space, but also in rural areas where, drive time can be prohibitive, where you're sort of surrounded by what looks like wilderness and natural spaces, but none of it's publicly accessible. And increasingly, I know through conversations with communities looking at using ARPA funds for, parks and trails, that kind of good data can show you exactly where those disparities exist today in your community. And then to Chris's point, there's lots of unseen barriers that aren't just geographical or, spatial, that are cultural and longstanding systemic forms of racism and other barriers to access. But the more that we can lean on some of those great tools that have been created and really put them to work when we're, funding projects, the better, I think. So I want to turn to Alex now and sort of start by saying everybody on this panel is on here because we're sort of the choir on this issue. You know, we all sort of get it already. We wouldn't have picked somebody that thinks the outdoors has no place in our missions, although maybe we should have, just to have a devil's advocate. But Alex, you know, you're a leader of a tourism promotion agency, and you obviously have counterparts across Pennsylvania that are embracing the outdoors to some extent, and maybe some others that aren't. But how do you make the case to others who may not quite see the connection between the tourism economy and the outdoors, that it is something they should pay attention to, or at least give consideration to in their missions and their strategies?
I mean, most importantly, I think we all have to continue to educate and provide data. I think you know, data and education is so important to this conversation because, you know, just like when your presentation earlier today, it just really sheds a light of how impactful the outdoor recreation economy is to Pennsylvania, but it's impacting all of our communities. And I think if you're not aware of it, if you're in my position or one of our positions in Pennsylvania and you're not aware of it, it's definitely something you need to educate yourself on. We as an organization here, you know, have identified what our natural assets are, and we know that we're not a, you know, first tier destination. We're not a destination that has an NFL team or a major league ballpark. So we know that, you know, our asset is the outdoors. It's our festivals, it's our heritage sites and our state parks. So I think showing data and education is probably one of the more important things to share with my counterparts here in the state, and show statistically that it affects everyone. It affects economic development, it affects tourism, it affects our quality of life. And that's how we continue to campaign. We partner with our Economic Development Corporation as well as our chamber now to do a campaign together called Made Possible in the Lehigh Valley. And a lot of that collaborative effort is really to shed what the quality of life is here in the Lehigh Valley. And I think we're starting to realize that talent attraction is so tied into this outdoor rec. And I've seen it in other states. I've seen it in Virginia. I've seen it in Florida. So I don't think it's unique to Pennsylvania, but it's definitely one of the driving forces that our counterparts need to be aware of. In
Great.
short,
Thanks, Alex.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's great. We got I think, a good challenging question in the chat that just questions, I think, the balance between economic development professionals who are often responsible, as I think Shireen said at the very beginning, for achieving metrics around things like square feet of development and jobs attracted, and sort of judged by, you know, how much property is developed in a community, and how you reconcile that with the outdoor economy, which is, you know, reliant on conserving open space and preserving and being good stewards of our natural resources. So Kevin, Shireen, since you're both representing economic development organizations, I'd like to turn to you and just see how you look at that balance within your organization. I know that some days you could be standing, you know, cutting the ribbon on a business, and then 3 hours later, you're out talking to a small business that's along a trail. And those are very different conversations, or can be very different conversations. And how do you reconcile that within your organization? And Kevin, I'll start with you.
Sure. I think it's unique to every organization and every community, clearly. And I think there is a spectrum by which you're judging the value of economic development, whether it, and they're very traditional metrics by which we can look: the consumption of open space, the infrastructure that's needed, and ultimately the jobs that are created. What are the quality of those jobs? Are they living wage jobs? Things of that nature. So I think largely that is, we try to view much through that lens initially. And we know that across Pennsylvania, certainly from the Northeast down into central part of Pennsylvania, larger warehousing and distribution centers have continued to consume a lot of land. And that's just a natural reality of the economy that we live in today. So I think there has to be this holistic balance that's reconciled with your community, whereby we don't have strong zoning rules in Pennsylvania. We're a very fragmented state. So I think that's where you really do have to have some leadership at a county level to advance that types of smart development, because we know that the type of lifestyles we all live right now, we are very incumbent on e-commerce, and that type of distribution is not going away. And I think there's a natural partnership between economic development organizations and open space preservation. The two go very hand in hand. I know Silas is certainly aware. We often joke that we work closely with our counterparts in open space preservation because that typically means more urban redevelopment or historic renovation. So I think it's also uplifting those organizations who are actively doing that type of work because it's very important, and more open space preservation tends to lead to more smart economic development or really redevelopment. And ultimately, that's kind of the balancing act that we have to provide. And then just very cursory too, obviously it's making it a core deliberate tactic and strategy within your organization or your county's planning documents. Here in York, obviously, we've made the outdoor economy an essential component to that. And we've walked the walk in terms of going out and advocating for or securing funding for open space projects, whether it's advancing a rail trail or using ARPA dollars to do an assessment of the outdoor economy in your county, things of that nature, or obviously waterfront. So I think it's trying to practice what you preach as well.
And Shireen, you had, I think, opened with saying you're one of the fastest growing counties in Pennsylvania. I'm sure this is a balance that you have to strike in your work.
Yeah, so I'm going to go at it from a different angle a little bit. You know, the pandemic brought some good things to us. And one of those was the advent and really pushing forward the concept of the remote worker, where the worker could decide, and it became acceptable in the business world for the worker to determine where they want to live, you know, based on their quality of life needs. So prior to pandemic, you know, we've always had a workforce challenge, you know, in the entire United States, Pennsylvania, and in each of our municipalities and counties. But I think that the pandemic brought to light a solution for perhaps resolving that or mitigating some of that workforce challenge, and that is to allow people to work where they want to work, live where they want to live, and be able to do both well. And the outdoor economy plays a key role in allowing for that. I'm right now recruiting for two high-level positions within our organization. And beyond skill sets and experience and education and all that traditional, you know, garbage, you know, what I'm really interviewing for is what kind of life do they want to live? What's their family dynamic? What do they want? And I'm assessing more than their experience and skill sets, whether a relocation will work for them and their family unit. And they'll be able to find the type of housing they want, the type of transportation they want, the type of, you know, job. The job is just kind of there. But that's not what I'm using as that recruiting tool. It's the natural landscape and the quality of life that this region offers. So I think, I hope that's here to stay. And I can see for economic development agencies, one of our new metrics will probably be employee retention and or employee relocations to your region. I'm not sure how we're going to measure those people or find them, but I think it's a new metric that we're going to need to get our arms around.
That's a great point.
Silas, could I add something to that?
Yeah, sure, Jim.
So this has come up in the questions a few times and also in the commentary about accessibility and usability of the populace in your region and area. One of the questions was actually about types of recreation. Motorized recreation was a comment I got specifically. I think this underscores the great importance in this planning process of stakeholder engagement, and where you have a unique opportunity in your community to shape and manage the development that you're going to see, including the use of recreational space, because they become opportunities for other development. I grew up in a small town outside Harrisburg called Steelton, and you know, it's a traditional industrial Rust Belt town here in Pennsylvania. They've got a skate park in the middle of town, and people travel from all over to that. So they built an asset, and DCNR helped to fund that, that attracts people to that community. Those are the kinds of things that communities need to think about, even if it's something new and different that they haven't done before, whether it's type of recreation, accessibility, attracting different groups of people within your community to be able to use those assets. That's the real important piece of this that needs to be considered.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jim. Thanks for that. We're on our way to wrapping this up, but and I'm going to bring up a closing slide with sort of some next steps. But Chris, I know one of the things we shared at the beginning was that Pennsylvania is going to be going through a process of looking at how to fully leverage the outdoor economy. One of those models is an Office of Outdoor Recreation. Could you, give us sort of the Cliff Notes version of what that looks like, how it's working other places, and why it could be meaningful for Pennsylvania?
I'm so glad you asked because, as is evident on this call, there's clearly so much great work already going on the ground. But the one thing that's missing in Pennsylvania that I think would take this outdoor recreation economy development to the next level would be the establishment of a state office of outdoor recreation. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, these are offices that work on a combination of things, whether they be economic development initiatives, stakeholder outreach, conservation and stewardship of public lands and waters, youth engagement, or unifying the business voice around outdoor recreation. And to date, 18 states have created these state offices of outdoor recreation. And just to put a pin on some of those states around Pennsylvania that have done this, Michigan, Maryland, Virginia, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and Massachusetts is starting to make headway. I think Pennsylvania is an obvious choice for our next state office of outdoor recreation because of the immense public land and water opportunities that exist across the state. These offices live in a variety of places in government. They might be in the Department of Parks, Heritage, and Tourism, or the Office of Economic Development, or the DCNR, Department of Commerce, or even in the governor's office. They're also created through a variety of pathways, including governor's announcement, or sometimes executive order or executive action, sometimes through legislation. But they accomplish a ton. And I'm about to put a document in the chat that outlines the impacts of these state offices of outdoor recreation, but they range from COVID-19 relief and economic recovery to broad economic development and marketing initiatives, conservation and stewardship work, public health, equitable access, education and workforce, and so many others. And when you look at many of these states that have a real brand defined around outdoor recreation, whether they be Utah or Colorado or Washington or New Mexico or Maine, they have established a state office of outdoor recreation. And when you look at the list as well, it's quite a broad bipartisan list. I think this is in recognition that outdoor recreation is an economic driver for all sorts of states. And it would be just so cool to see Pennsylvania make a similar choice. And again, I'll drop a document into the chat that outlines what these offices are, what they do, and what they've accomplished. So thanks for that question, Silas.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. So just to wrap things up, and I know there's a big desire amongst many of the people that are watching this webinar for action. It's a little bit unfulfilling to say that we hope that this conversation is the first of many and that the stakes of this conversation continue to get higher and higher as we move forward with DCNR's coordinating work with DCD and the governor's office around the idea of an office of outdoor recreation and the outdoor economy in general. We can also start very small. So if you're someone that was watching this either from the conservation side or from the economic development side, and you don't feel like those connections are happening locally, the best thing you can do is take that next step in building a relationship. The worst thing that happens is if you're a conservationist, you reach out to your economic development organization and it doesn't go anywhere. But I think in reality, what you've heard today is there are so many shared interests between those two groups that we can make these conversations happen in ways that they haven't in the past and start building towards some really tangible impact around leveraging this. There's also legislative initiatives going on around Senate Bill 525, and we would assume other legislation to come around the use of ARPA funds or future infrastructure funding. And so stay tuned to We Can Serve PA and other entities that are really trying to advance the advocacy around this. PA Parks and Forests Foundation is another one. And continue to make the case to county and local municipalities that we have ARPA funding now. We we can demonstrate very easily the economic impact of this, the public health benefits, the stormwater impacts, all the great things that the outdoor economy and outdoor assets can provide. And if you're looking for information on that, you can reach out to me directly, but you also have organizations like We Conserve PA who are actively working on connecting ARPA to municipalities and counties, and your DCNR regional advisors that serve your region. And you can participate in efforts that are already underway. PAC launched the Outdoor Network several years ago, which is a coalition of businesses. The Pennsylvania Downtown Center has a nature-based placemaking program that's helping individual communities leverage outdoor assets. There's regional trail, river, outdoor towns across Pennsylvania. And as you've heard multiple times now, DCNR is really working to elevate this conversation through their new director position and through the process that that director will lead us all through as stakeholders. So there are ways that you can take action now, and I'm sure you can think of many others in your region or with your partners. But as you can see, we're really trying to push this forward on a number of different levels. The best thing that you can do now is take a CNRAC endorsed rest of the day off and close your laptop and head outside. I don't know, it's a little bit gray and a little bit rainy, but don't let that stop you. Spend the rest of the day in a park, in a park or on a trail. And finally, thank you again to DCNR and to CNRAC for hosting this conversation, and to our fantastic panelists for joining us. We hope everybody has a great day.